Here we are, and we're doing our devotion for reading through the Bible in a year in the 1 Year Bible. And today is July 10th, and we're looking at Acts chapter 27, verses 21 through 44. So, yesterday was a cliffhanger, and today we pick up as Paul and the crew of the ship are lost at sea in a storm, nearly giving up hope. Since they had not eaten for a long time to preserve their food supply, now Paul encourages them and makes it known that an angel from God told him that they would not die and that Paul would indeed stand before Caesar. Yet the ship, Paul said, would run aground on some island. So first he gave them the good news, then the bad news. After 2 weeks in the storm, the sailors made a sounding, which is like lowering a weight to determine the depth. In those days, they put some grease in a hollowed out spot at the bottom of the weight to see what was on the bottom of the lake or sea that they were on. So the first sounding was 15 fathoms or about 90 feet. That was the second sounding. The first sounding was 120 feet. The second one was 90 feet. So they were getting closer to land. They were afraid of crashing against the rocks. So they let down 4 anchors because the front and the back of the ship were about the same. In those days, it didn't matter whether they dropped them from the front or the back. And prayed for day to come. Of course, the sailors, as they did this, really didn't care about the ship because they were planning on sneaking away and escaping. But Paul found them out and told the centurion that unless everyone stayed on the ship, they were goners. This was pretty astute on Paul's part, but not all that hard to figure out, because if they were going to make it, they needed the sailors to man the ship and to navigate the treacherous waters as they got close to land. So the soldiers, what they did is they cut the ropes for the ship's boat and let it float away so no one could escape. Near dawn, Paul urged the people to eat to give them strength. They would need it. He took bread and gave thanks to God and broke it and began to eat. This was traditional Jewish custom for a meal, and they were all encouraged and they ate along with Paul. Even though many of them were Gentiles, they followed his example readily, and then they lightened the ship further by throwing out the wheat. We see that it was indeed a grain vessel into the sea at this point. When the day came, they didn't recognize their location, but they saw a bay with a beach and tried to run the ship ashore on the beach, but struck a sandbar and got stuck, and the waves were breaking apart the stern of the ship. The soldiers, well, they were going to kill the prisoners, just to make sure that no one got away. However, the centurion, wanting to save Paul, kept them from killing anybody, and he ordered them all to head for shore, whether by swimming or floating on planks or pieces of the ship. They all made it, just as Paul said. Well, Paul, in spite of all that has transpired, is not perfect. He starts out by saying, basically, I told you so. However, quickly we see that he does not dwell on the past. He is a passionate person who cares deeply about the lives of his fellow travelers. He has a pastor's heart. He's also seen as a prophet, one who receives revelations and visions from God. For many of Luke's Gentile readers, there would have been absolutely no need to even report on Paul's trial in Rome, because Paul's surviving the storm would have been total proof of his innocence in their eyes. There is an important note that the ship was drifting across the Sea of Adria, but this was not the same as the modern-day Adriatic Sea, which is between the west coast of Italy and the former Yugoslavia. Paul was on what we would call nowadays the Ionian Sea, which was between Greece and Italy, extending downward to Crete and Malta. Another important note is the calmness that Paul displayed. This would have proven to his shipmates that he was a sincere philosopher, and it would have gained him their respect. The meal that they ate was not the Lord's Supper, but it certainly brings it to mind, as well as Jesus' feeding of the 5,000. In the end, we see that God protected Paul and his shipmates from all the natural circumstances which could have led quite easily to death and total disaster. All of this happened to testify to the power of God. This is our God. He truly is able to rescue and save us, not only from natural causes and disasters and circumstances, but also from sin and death. He does this through the gift of faith in the suffering, death, resurrection of Jesus, our Savior. Furthermore, Paul's example is very instructive to all of us in how to deal with calamity in a godly way by calmly trusting in God's guidance. Like Paul, none of us is perfect, we know, but this should not stop us from helping others with the wisdom and experience that have been granted to us by God. May God be with you.